I watched my own funeral from across the street. My son, my daughter-in-law, and even my granddaughter stood there crying, hugging each other, pretending to mourn me. But I wasn't dead. They declared me gone for one reason only, to take everything I owned. And that day, standing in the rain, watching them put flowers on an empty coffin, I promised myself one thing. They'd see me again, alive. My name is Eleanor. I'm 68 years old, and until a few months ago, I thought my family loved me. I raised 2 children alone after losing my husband early. Every penny I saved, every dream I built, it was for them. But after my surgery last year, I started feeling strange things. Letters I never received. Bank notifications I didn't understand. And then, my house was suddenly sold while I was still living in it. When I called my son Mark to ask what was happening, he said, "Mom, don't worry. I'll handle everything." The next day, I woke up in a hospital bed, with doctors whispering outside the curtain. One of them said softly her family signed the release forms. It's time. Time for what? When I tried to move, I realized my wrist had been strapped with medical tape. A nurse looked at me with pity, then leaned close and whispered, "Your family already arranged the death certificate. They think you passed last night." My heart froze. I wanted to scream, but no voice came out. Was I losing my mind? Or was this real? A few hours later, they rolled me out on a stretcher toward the morgue. The nurse who whispered to me earlier came running and unstrapped my hand. "You need to go, now." I stumbled into the night, barefoot, half-conscious but alive. I didn't go home. I couldn't. I hid for 3 days in a women's shelter near the old bridge. My mind kept repeating the same words. They wanted me gone. Then, one morning, I opened the local newspaper. On the front page, a photograph, my own face. The headline read, "Beloved mother, Eleanor Hayes, passes peacefully at 68. I felt the world spin beneath me. They hadn't just abandoned me. They'd erased me. So I decided, if they wanted me dead, I'd stay that way, for now. Because when I walked back into their perfect little lives, I wanted it to be at the moment they least expected. And I'd make sure every single one of them knew what it feels like to lose everything. When I realized my own children had buried me alive, not in a coffin, but in lies, something inside me shattered forever. But grief turned to something stronger, clarity. I had no money, no ID, no proof I existed anymore. The hospital's files said I was deceased. Even my bank account was closed under legal verification. Mark and his wife, Denise, had made sure of that. So I began to plan, quietly, carefully. For 3 weeks, I slept in the back room of a small church. Father Raymond, the kind priest there, believed my story, though even he struggled to imagine such cruelty. He gave me a spare coat, food, and an old phone. From that phone, I started searching. Denise's social media was full of smiling pictures in my living room, my curtains, my old cat, my piano, and in the corner of one photo, a vase, the same one my late husband gave me on our first anniversary. I could almost hear his voice. "Don't let them break you, Eleanor." I wrote everything down, every detail, every clue, like a detective building a case for my own resurrection. Then, one night, I saw something that broke the last bit of my restraint. Mark had posted a photo with the caption, "Finally debt-free. Mom would be proud." Proud of what? Of selling my life insurance. Of using the money I saved for my grandchildren's college to buy himself a brand new car. That night, I cried until morning. Not because of the betrayal, but because I finally accepted the truth. My son wasn't the boy I raised anymore, but I didn't want the police. I didn't want headlines. I wanted them to face me, to look into my eyes and feel the weight of what they'd done. So I reached out to the only person I still trusted, my late husband's lawyer, Mr. Franklin. When I told him everything, there was silence on the other end. Then he said quietly, Mrs. Hayes, your son filed the inheritance claim yesterday, but if you're truly alive, we can stop this. The next day, he met me in his office after hours. I watched him pull a folder labeled Estate of Eleanor Hayes from the cabinet. Inside were documents with forged signatures, mine. They'd even filed for permanent property transfer. My home, my car, my savings, all gone. But not for long. Because I was going to walk back into that house. Not as a ghost, not as a victim, but as a mother who came back from the dead and wanted answers. That evening, the wind was cold, the kind that carries memories with it. I stood across the street from my old house, the lights glowing warmly behind the curtains I once sewed myself. Inside, I could hear laughter, my family's laughter. I took a deep breath. My hands trembled as I stepped forward, each foot heavier than the last. When I reached the door, I almost turned away. Part of me still hoped there was some explanation, some kindness hidden behind the betrayal. But then, through the window, I saw Denise wearing my pearl necklace, the one my husband gave me before he died. She leaned across the table and laughed, saying, "Mark, your mom had no idea how much her life was worth." My heart cracked. I knocked. The room went silent. Denise frowned, wiping her hands. Mark called out, "Who's there?" When he opened the door, his face turned white, like he'd seen a ghost. His lips moved, but no words came out. "Hello, Mark," I said softly. My voice shook. "You look surprised." Denise stood frozen behind him, her glass slipping from her hand and shattering across the floor. Their daughter, little Emily, peeked from behind the table. "Grand," she whispered. That single word tore through me. My granddaughter still remembered me. They hadn't erased everything. Mark finally found his voice. This isn't possible. You're dead." "I was supposed to be," I said. "You made sure of that." The color drained from his face. Denise took a step back. I walked inside, the scent of my old house wrapping around me like a ghost's embrace. Everything looked familiar, yet wrong. My photos were gone. My piano was covered with their decorations. Even the armchair where I used to knit was replaced. "I came to see my family," I whispered, "and I found strangers living in my home." Denise's voice trembled. We thought you'd want us to move on." "Move on," I interrupted, tears streaming down my face. "You forged my signature. You sold my memories. You buried me with lies, and you sat here counting what I left behind." Emily started crying. Mark knelt, rubbing his forehead, whispering, "Mom, I didn't mean to kill me on paper." I snapped. "Didn't mean to steal what your father and I built together." The silence that followed was heavy enough to choke the air. Then I turned toward the window, toward the world outside that still believed I was gone. "Well," I said finally, "you wanted me dead. But here I am. Flesh, blood, and disappointment." I walked toward the door. Behind me, Denise whispered, "What are you going to do now?" I turned to her slowly. "You'll find out soon enough." And as I stepped back into the night, I saw their reflection in the glass, pale, trembling, guilty. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one afraid anymore. After that night, sleep never came easily again. I would close my eyes and still see their faces, the shock, the guilt, the fear. But I didn't want revenge driven by hate. I wanted truth to burn them the same way their betrayal had burned me. Mr. Franklin, the lawyer, filed a petition to reopen my estate. The moment the court confirmed I was alive, every single transfer, every insurance claim, every forged signature became a crime. Denise tried to convince Mark to run, but I wasn't after their freedom, I was after their hearts. The court froze all accounts. The house was returned to my name, and when they received the notice, Mark came to see me. He stood outside the church where I now lived, no mansion, no warmth, just old wooden benches and silence. "Mom," he whispered, "please, you didn't think I mattered once I stopped giving," I said quietly. He knelt down, tears in his eyes. We needed money. I thought we could fix it later. Later. I smiled bitterly. You buried me, Mark. There is no later after that. Denise never came. She was too proud to face the woman she'd stolen from. But a few weeks later, I saw her in the grocery store parking lot, her face pale, tired, desperate. Their friends had turned away, their accounts empty, their reputation ruined. I didn't say a word. Sometimes silence is louder than any scream. A month passed. One evening, there was a knock at the church door. It was little Emily. She held a drawing of me, standing beside her with angel wings. She said, "Mom and Dad fight every day now. I just wanted to see you, Grandma." I knelt, hugging her tightly. Tears wet her hair. "Never forget this, sweetheart," I whispered. "Love is worth more than any inheritance. When you choose money over people, you end up poor forever." She nodded, and for the first time, I felt peace. The next morning, I packed my things and left town quietly. I didn't take revenge the way people expect. No shouting, no court battles, no destruction. I simply lived. I opened a small shelter for elderly women who'd been -1 by their families. Women like me, forgotten but still breathing. Every night, I light a candle for those who are forced to die in silence, and another for those who will one day regret it. Because that's the real punishment. Not losing wealth, but living with the knowledge that the person you betrayed survived, and somewhere that mother you buried alive is still standing tall. They faked my death for inheritance, but I gave them something more permanent than money, a lifetime of guilt. And as for me, I walked away from their greed, and finally came back to life.